Welcome to this prelude video for a new series where we are going to be playing a realistic early start for Workers and Resources Soviet Republic. Now this video's got two objectives. The first objective is to outline the objective of the series, just to give you a feel of what I want to try and do. The second objective is probably a bit more important. That is that I've got a problem. This map was originally created for a 1900 historical early start to be played after the game had obtained full releases. If any of you followed my Four Crosses series, the objectives of that series was going to be the objectives of the series on this map. Obviously, with the Metro update coming in and introducing realistic mode, plus the fact that the final release is probably going to be delayed, I've done is I've taken this map now and adapted it to this realistic early start and removing the historical storytelling element, but there will be a slightly different story. And the problem I've got is that I've got two starting locations which represent two different play styles, and also I'm struggling a little bit with the date because I'm not comfortable with a 1900 start, so I'm fluctuating at the moment between 1920 and 1945. So I thought I'd make this video, put the problem to you guys, and then hopefully what you can do is put in the comments what starting location and play style you would like to see. Also suggest a possible starting date, and the idea is that by me reading your comments will help me make that final decision so that I can get what I want to do absolutely clear in my mind. That intro out, let me just get into the first part, which is the map itself and what the objectives are going to be. Now, probably the best way to explain the objectives is to talk about why I originally created the map. As I said, this map was created for a 1900 historical start, but with an additional challenge. And the storyline was that there would be a village here, in this area here, which has now been removed because of the realistic start. This village would represent a construction camp with responsibility for reconnecting a rail line starting at the top here in a place called High Valley, which you can see is a full-size customs office, and then the rail line is to run down through the valley here. You can see there's a hint of the old rail line, so the challenge was more of a restoration of the railway, and the railway would run down to here. What the railway would do is connect up two Soviet republics and provide a good communication line between the two. And then there was a supplementary objective, which is its historical context, was that the idea is that all the oil is on the east, and this would represent Russia becoming a major oil and gas producer later on in the game, and that would be connected into the rail network either by using ships or by pushing the rail line out. You can see that this line represents the old rail line running across here. This is the reason why all the gas and oil is concentrated in one part of the map. The other pieces are simply there just to support the early start. That was the overall objective, but as I said, the original one was I put a little village in here, similar to what I did with my Four Crosses series, and there's some coal just to the north, but there's no real iron deposits. That's something I took away, and the idea is that the village would grow and come out here. But since I've decided to use this as part of realistic mode, what I've done is I've removed the village, because with realistic mode now you can build everything. And the idea with this start, which is called Gorzin, is based on my mini series, was to have a construction camp here. And the idea with this construction camp would come in and it would start to build our first town. And what I've done is I've put in a cathedral over here. And the idea is possibly to build the first major town here. We may build a small village about here. My main instinct is to work with this construction camp. And the idea is that as the economy expands, the construction camp will spread across the map. And so this is the original starting position. This is the one I'm heavily inclined towards. The lake here has got access to sewage. We've got coal but of course we'd have to import the iron ore, which means we're going to need to get an industry up and running, which will be the major challenge here. Of course, the other thing also that's come on the map is we've got plenty of access to gravel, so we can get some gravel production up and running. So this is the first starting location, and it's very much a what you'd call similar to what I've done in the mini series, which will be coming to an end without the rush to build a initial city here. The construction camp will be the main driver for the building process, and then eventually we'll come out here. Now, a secondary objective of this series is to experiment with town layouts, and especially town layouts that can be later include metro and trams. Hopefully, as we spread across the map, we'll be able to try out different layouts for small towns, large towns, possibly a major city, and there's actually a potential for a major city here, which is in the middle of the farmland here. So that's the first starting location. What I'll do is I'll talk about the start date when I show you the second location. Now, the second location was originally put in as another option for the original map, because one of the problems that you get with starting in 1900 is the fact that you get, if I show you here, I mean, obviously we're in 1960, so we can see everything. You're very dependent on, if I show you bulldozers, which is a good example, you're very dependent on Nova's horse-drawn mod and steam bulldozer mod for the first 20 odd years. And one of the problems we're playing the Soviet with a connection, bearing in mind that with realistic mode now, you can't purchase Western vehicles without a road connection to a Western customs house. What that means is that we won't get access to the first mechanical bulldozer until 1936. And that is a bit of a dilemma. And one of the things I kind of half want to avoid in this series is actually using the feeding stations for the horse-drawn vehicles, because I don't think it really fits into context. I'm kind of half prepared to bend the rules for the steam bulldozer, because what we can do, because the steam bulldozer and the horse-drawn cart will go to a normal gas station, what I'm kind of bending the rules a little bit by saying that if we use the steam bulldozer, it will be powered by fuel rather than coal. So then we won't have to build a coal fueling platform, because if you'll build one of those, then what will happen is the normal vehicles which I will buy will then go there and run on coal, which is okay, but it just doesn't, it's just a little bit of immersion breaking. So that's the reason why I'm heading towards 1920, 1930 rather than a 1900 start. Now, the key thing about when I put this together is that over here we've actually got a Western custom shed. And of course, with the Western custom shed now with realistic mode, it means that if we wanted some slightly earlier bulldozers, excavators or vehicles, we can now buy the vehicles from this custom shed here, which gives us a use for the rubles, because with realistic mode you can't spend rubles unless you've got a connection to a customs post. And it's a bit of a whim, I put in a Western power connection. Then I thought a little bit and thought, well, in the spirit of an early start, you wouldn't have a power connection. So, but I kind of left it in for anyone who wanted to play with a start where they could get early access trade to the west. So this is the starting location. Now, one of the problems with this starting location is that because there would be a lot of support from this area here, and of course I had to put this lake in for sewage disposal, but this isn't a real water lake, it's actually a aesthetic lake, and the only way you can drop sewage into here is by using this terrestrial discharge mod, which means you can put it in there. To make this a little bit more of a challenge is that this is actually on a raised plateau, and what we've got is the mud roads coming down here. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is break out of this area, and this comes back to the construction office theme, that rather than the original plan, which would be to build a small village up here, although we could build a small mountain village here. Yeah, maybe that's an option, build a small mountain village here, overlooking the area here. What I want to do is start with the construction camp, because I think it fits in very well with the realistic mode, because we've got to build everything from scratch. And then of course what we're going to have to do is break out down here. There's a little bit of coal, was it iron? I think it's coal in this location here. It's not massive, but there's also the option to go the other way down to here, where there's quite substantial coal deposits here and iron over here. But of course the downside is that we've got to negotiate this very steep path up here. Either that or use shipping, because I don't think there's a way out here. So that's the second starting location, but you can see it's got a totally different play style to the first location, in the sense that the proximity of the NATO office, so we'll be able to kind of mix and match some NATO vehicles in. And I'll be honest, I'm very tempted to start here. The more I look at it, the more I think, oh yeah, I mean, because it's just got that different flavor. And from a historical point of view, which I'm obviously not going to be playing in this series, it would represent the trade between the Russia and the West prior to the revolutionary period. This is the reason why this was actually built up in here on the original map. This isn't something I've added. I mean, it was just literally from a immersion point of view. So I wouldn't be buying, say, Western vehicles from the customs office or a depot. So in some ways, the game has come full circle with respect with the introduction of realistic mode. So we now come to the crux of my dilemma. Would you like to see a game where we've got early access to NATO and we can do a little bit of role play with trading with NATO? We won't use the power connection. We'll stay strictly to the construction camp, possibly build a little town, then break out and start to develop our economy that way. And I think this is open to possibly a 1920s start, but I'm open to suggestions. I mean, if you really do want to see a 1900 start and you're okay with the possible immersion breaking of the mixture of the fueling stations, I mean, feel free to chuck it in the comments. If there's enough of you who want to see it, I'll go for it. And then of course you've got the other solution up here, which is going to be a bit more restrictive if we go very early, because we won't have access to Western machinery, and of course we've got no power supply here. So I feel that this lends itself to something like about 1930-35, so we could play a little bit with limited equipment, and then we'll have the option to break in and get an early bulldozer. And I think that also applies to the excavators as well, which would give us a little bit of momentum. We can then expand across the map that way. As I say, I can't really make up my mind. I've actually play tested both scenarios just for the fun of it, just to try and fix it that way, but it didn't work. In fact, it just made it worse. So feel free to write a comment, suggest what the location is, just if you want to use the names. This one's called Gorzin. I think the other one was called New Hope, I think. Let's just come over to here. I've overshot. No, I haven't. Yeah, this one's called New Hope. So just say Gorzin or New Hope. And then if you've got a preferred start date, as I say, I'm open to all suggestions. I mean, if you want to be absolutely crazy and say start in 1960, we'll start in 1960. But my inclination is just for the early start. My initial preference is between 1920 and 1930, but if you do want to see a 1900 start, feel free to chuck it in the comments. So this is where I'm going to leave it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it interesting, and whatever you do, enjoy your gaming.